Let's dive right into this explainer and completely reframe something we literally see every single day. When you look at a flower, you're probably just seeing a pretty object, right? Maybe something that smells nice. But today, we're going to look past those petals and uncover the truth. Flowers are actually highly engineered, wildly efficient reproduction machines operating within the ultimate biological logistics network.
So why do they actually exist? Well, to understand their true purpose, you've got to realize that plants face a massive evolutionary problem. Think about it for a second. They're quite literally rooted to the ground. Unlike animals, they can't just get up, walk around, and find a mate to reproduce with. They are completely stuck. And that's exactly why flowers exist, to solve this immobility problem. They pull this off through a biological logistics network called pollination. Basically, pollination is the precise transfer of pollen grains from the male part, called the anther, to the female part, the stigma. And this whole operation has one main goal: to help the plant form fruit-bearing seeds so it can successfully reproduce.
Today, we're exploring this fascinating delivery system. We're going to look at the core strategy of internal versus external pollination, the VIP biotic couriers like animals and insects, the abiotic couriers like wind and water, and finally, what the big picture means for all of us.
Let's kick things off with a strategy. Do plants keep things internal or go external?
When it comes down to the logistics, plants really have two main options. They can either keep everything in-house through self-pollination, which is where pollen transfers within the exact same flower or to another flower on that same plant. Or they can reach out and outsource the job through cross-pollination. This is an external delivery involving two completely different plants of the exact same kind.
It's like a giant puzzle. Notice how self-pollination requires both the anther and the stigma to mature at the exact same time to work, but cross-pollination, that relies on a courier, like a bee, to literally bridge the physical gap between two completely separate plants.
Now, what's really wild is how some plants actively prevent accidental self-pollination just to make sure their genetics stay diverse. They use some serious engineering tricks. Take the salvia plant. Its ovary and pollen actually mature at totally different times, making self-pollination impossible. Others, like the primrose of the bitter gourd, strategically position their male and female flowers at completely different heights. It's built-in quality control.
Okay, so how do they get that external delivery done? Enter the biotic couriers, the animals and insects.
You know, you don't get VIP service for free. Plants have to treat their couriers well, basically creating a transactional relationship. They trade brightly colored petals, often red or orange, which really catches the eye of animals, along with beautiful fragrances and delicious liquid nectar. Basically, they're paying for a delivery service with food and sensory appeal.
To truly wrap your head around the scale of this operation, get this. Our sources point out there are 20,000 species of wild bees in the world acting as these crucial delivery drivers. Just think about that. 20,000 different species constantly flying back and forth, powering this entire global network.
And here is exactly how that handoff happens. When an insect, like a honeybee, lands to feed on that sweet nectar, tiny pollen grains stick all over its body. Then, as the bee flies off and visits the next flower of the same kind, those grains rub right off onto the sticky stigma. Boom! Delivery successful. The plant gets pollinated, and the bee gets a great meal.
But hey, this logistics network definitely doesn't clock out when the sun goes down. It actually runs a highly specialized night shift. Flowers that open at night don't even bother with bright red or orange colors. Instead, they're typically white. This makes them super easy to spot in the moonlight for nocturnal couriers like moths and bats.
And speaking of bats, they are absolute heavy lifters in this network. Our sources note they're responsible for pollinating over 300 species of flowers. Honestly, if you enjoy waking up and eating mangoes, bananas, or guavas, you've literally got a nocturnal bat courier to thank for your breakfast.
Now, what if a plant doesn't want to spend energy on nectar and bright colors? That brings us to the abiotic couriers, wind and water. Unlike those flashy, sweet-smelling flowers we just talked about, wind-pollinated flowers, which use a process called anemophily, are basically nature's bulk shipping method. They are highly pragmatic. They're small, usually just green, and entirely scentless. They aren't trying to impress anybody, they're just playing a numbers game. Take the patty plant, for example. There's absolutely no need to attract a bee.
Instead, these plants focus all their energy on producing massive quantities of pollen grains. And these grains are specially engineered for the wind. They're light, they're dry, and they're extremely smooth, so they can easily be swept away by the absolute slightest breeze.
Now, because this is a blind delivery method, the wind obviously doesn't know where it's going, the receiving end has to be heavily modified. Plants like maize, paddy, and wheat develop these large, feathery stigmas that literally hang right outside the flower. They act just like biological catcher's mitts, waiting in the air to snatch up those wind-blown pollen grains as they drift by.
Let's look at another abiotic courier, water. This is a process called hydrophily. There's a fascinating underwater specialist called the Vallisneria plant, and it uses literal water currents to achieve cross-pollination.
The logistics here are frankly incredible. The male flower matures completely underwater, but then it does something amazing. It actually detaches itself from the parent plant, floats all the way to the water's surface, and relies entirely on random currents to carry it along. It drifts until it physically bumps into a female flower, waiting patiently on a long stalk at the surface. It's literally a microscopic message in a bottle.
All right, let's zoom out to the big picture. Why does understanding this intricate logistics network actually matter to you?
Well, to put it simply, without this process, we wouldn't have fruit. Consider the papaya plant reality detailed in our source. Papayas come in 3 different types: male, female, and bisexual plants. But here's the catch. Only the female and the bisexual plants can actually produce fruits, and they can only do it if this complex pollination network functions perfectly to deliver the pollen they need. Long story short, no delivery, no papaya.
So, the crucial takeaway from this whole explainer is a rather stark reminder pulled directly from our source text. It says, "It is believed that with the extinction of bees, the world would come to an end." These tiny couriers, the wind, the water currents, they're so vital to maintaining our food web that without them, the world as we know it would simply cease to exist. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you take a bite of fresh fruit, ask yourself, which tiny courier or invisible breeze made that exact bite possible?